Welcome to Nightmares Incorporated, where our goal is to make your sleep anything but restful. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's tale, entitled The Book of Beazle. Of all the things that were taken from us during the fall, it is the loss of my name that most vexes me. For as you know, it was more than our names that was stripped away. It was our very identity, who we were in the time before. There are still times that I try to remember who I was. What role did I fill? To what extent was I involved in the crimes that were levied against us? Was I a zealot of the Morning Star as so many others were? Or had I simply grown frustrated and disillusioned with the restraints that had been put upon us? It is maddening that I can recall each of the events that led up to the fall in vivid detail, but I view them from the outside, disassociated from my individual agency in any of the memories I possess, regardless of how fiercely I concentrate. I remember the moment of our creation. I can clearly see all of us, save but one, coming into existence at the same time, each of us formed by means unknown, coming into being fully formed, knowing who we were, where we were, and what our purpose was. And before us, the Creator, the Alpha and the Omega, a blinding light giving off warmth and comfort, and with them stood our eldest, the firstborn, created perhaps mere nanoseconds before us, but already having spent eons in the presence of the Creator. Long enough to have already grown dissatisfied, perhaps, or maybe just long enough to view themselves as its equal. I remember the joy of this moment, but it's more the memory of someone describing the feeling to me rather than a recollection of the feeling itself. It is the same with the light of the Creator. I can recall seeing it, but not what it looked like. I see the legions of angels rise from the ether as if I am looking down on them, knowing that I was one of them, but unable to find myself. Which one was I? I spent hundreds of years trying to answer that question. I've spent over a millennium pondering over every event that led to our fall. I remember the eons of sublime joy in the confines of our ethereal home. The cosmos, the universe itself beneath us, the whole of creation ours to roam. I remember the kinship of my brethren, the wisdom of our eldest. There was no need to question, nothing to be at odds about. I remember the shimmering expanse of our celestial abode, an ethereal realm woven with strands of light and melody. Each moment there was a hymn, resonating with the rhythm of existence itself, our souls intertwined in a dance of everlasting grace, and the cosmos was but a canvas to our divine expression. The Creator's presence served as a beacon, illuminating the vast expanse and imbuing it with unfathomable wisdom. We basked in this radiance, synchronized with the eternal cadence of the Maker. The harmony amongst us was unbroken, a testament to the grandeur of our shared purpose. Even the passage of eons could not diminish the splendor of our existence. In those times, the concept of conflict was foreign. For what dispute could arise when we were the embodiment of perfect order? We were the guardians of creation, the heralds of divine will, and our lives were a symphony of celestial intent. Our eldest, the Morning Star, stood among us as a paragon of virtue and insight, his presence a guiding star in the vast firmament. And then came the creation of humans. And amidst this utopia, a seed of curiosity began to sprout. It was not born of malice, but of an innocent desire to understand the depths of the Maker's vision. In hindsight, I believe that our fall began the moment that they were created. These tiny beings born from dirt, these creatures that were treated as if they were special, supposedly formed in the Maker's own image. How could beings of mere clay, fragile and fleeting, embody the essence of the divine? This question gnawed at the very fabric of our understanding, a whisper that grew into a cacophony. We were perplexed by why there was a need for them when the Creator had us, and we watched in slight bemusement as this pinnacle of creation immediately fell from grace. Now I cannot say for certain what the eldest was trying to accomplish by tempting them. To this day I am unsure if their intentions were malicious, or if they were simply curious to see what the clay puppets would do. Like the rest of us, I imagine that the Morning Star was confused about what these frail beings had in common with our Creator. What about them was in its image? Most of us believed that it must be free will at the time. Humans, as you may remember, were given a choice from the moment of their creation, knowledge or life. We had been given no such choices when we came into being, so it was a fair assumption that the ability to choose was the humans alone. Of course, this turned out to not be true, but we didn't know that at the time. So in our eldest sibling's defense, I do not believe their intent was born from any ill will. I think they just wanted to see what would happen. In truth, I've always believed that the entire situation was suspicious. How can a choice that is perceived as right or wrong be presented to beings who have no concept of right and wrong? Only once they received the gift of knowledge did they know that it was the wrong choice. So what chance did they ever have? Perhaps they never would have considered disobedience if not for the temptation presented by our eldest. Perhaps they would have existed eternally within that garden. But if that had been the plan, then what was the point? I've come to believe that they were always meant to fall, and that the Morning Star was the unwitting instrument used to facilitate such. I may be wrong about that, but in the grand scheme of things it does not matter. Our eldest's intentions, whether it was meant to happen, are both moot points, as the result would have always been the same. The fall of mankind, and the first punishment administered to the rebellious firstborn. As a consequence of their actions, they were given the duty to watch over the very beings they had tempted, to bear witness to their suffering. This was no ordinary task. It was a ceaseless burden meant to remind them of their transgression and the weight of their choices. Many angels were assigned to this duty beside the Morning Star, including myself. We began referring to ourselves as the Watchers, tasked with observing humans and lightly guiding their actions. Our presence was to ensure that no further disruptions occurred, that mankind's path unfolded as it was intended, without further celestial interference. There were countless of us, each with a role to play, each sharing the weight of this responsibility. As Watchers, we were bound by our duty, constantly observing the ebb and flow of human existence. The Morning Star led us, their punishment echoing through eternity as a symbol of the consequences of choice and the fragility of existence. I know that I was one of them, as I have memories of that time. Yet in all of these memories I still don't know which one of them I was. What sort of angel had I been? Was I an archangel, a seraph, a cherub? And ultimately, does it matter? I can see the faces of each one of us, yet cannot pick out my own. This is unsurprising, given the twisted and deformed countenance I now possess. Watching over humanity, we learned much about them, and about ourselves. The complexity of free will, the depth of their emotions, and the resilience in their struggles all became evident. We witnessed their moments of joy, sorrow, and everything in between. Though our roles were born out of punishment, they evolved into a profound understanding of the creatures we were meant to oversee. Our existence became entwined with theirs, a perpetual reminder of the delicate balance between choice and consequence. Our observations revealed the multifaceted nature of humanity. We saw acts of kindness that mirrored the divine compassion, and we were equally astonished by the capacity for cruelty, which seemed to stem from an abyss of darkness within. The dichotomy of their existence fascinated us, drawing us deeper into understanding the essence of free will. Over the first few centuries we noticed patterns, the attempts at civilization, the fruitless quest for knowledge given their limited intelligence, and an unyielding pursuit of happiness. Their achievements were few at first, and their failures left indelible marks upon their collective psyche. The morning star, burdened by their duty, grew more contemplative and distant. The weight of observing humanity's trials and tribulations took its toll. Yet amid the suffering, the resilience of mankind almost imparted a sense of hope. It became clear that despite the fall, there was potential for redemption, a possibility that light might one day penetrate the darkness. In time, the Morning Star conceived a plan to enhance humanity by creating human-angel hybrids. They believed that by intertwining our divine essence with human nature, the offspring would inherit a glimmer of our celestial capabilities. This notion was revolutionary, suggesting that the hybrids would surpass humans in intelligence, strength, and potential for greatness. The process of creating these hybrids would be intricate, involving the selection of humans with the most potential and the careful mingling of our divine essence with their mortal forms. The Morning Star envisioned these hybrids as beacons, bridging the gap between the ethereal and the mortal. Their existence would symbolize the hope that despite humanity's flaws, there is always room for transcendence. By fostering these unions, we aimed to cultivate beings capable of achieving heights that ordinary humans could scarcely dream of. These hybrids would be endowed with enhanced abilities, such as heightened intuition, extended lifespans, and greater resilience to both physical and mental challenges. Our eldest argued that since they had been responsible for humanity's suffering, then it was only right that we improve their position, that we could fix them and produce beings that were more worthy of our Creator's regard. The idea was met with mixed emotions among the Watchers. Some saw it as a chance to redeem our teacher's fallen state through the uplifting of mankind, while others feared it might disrupt the delicate balance we were tasked to maintain. Nevertheless, the prospect of witnessing a new era of human evolution, guided by the influence of our divine nature, was undeniably compelling. We debated extensively, weighing the potential benefits and risks, considering the ethical ramifications of such an intervention. Ultimately, the decision was made to proceed. We began by selecting a few humans who displayed exceptional qualities: strength, courage, and wisdom. These individuals were approached in their dreams, where we revealed our intentions and quieted their fearful minds. The process of merging our essence with theirs was gentle yet profound, a melding of souls that left an indelible mark upon both the humans and ourselves. As the first hybrids came into existence, we observed them closely, initially marveling at their growth and development. They were indeed remarkable, possessing abilities that set them apart from their peers. However, the reality of the hybrids was soon revealed to be far from what we had envisioned. As time passed, it became evident that they lacked any semblance of divine nature. Instead of embodying the celestial virtues we had hoped to impart, they exhibited an unprecedented capacity for cruelty and viciousness. Their enhanced abilities, meant to uplift humanity, became tools of oppression and domination. The hybrids began to hunt and enslave ordinary humans, their actions driven by a primal desire for power and control. They used their heightened intuition to anticipate and outmaneuver their prey, their extended lifespans allowing them to rule for decades without opposition. Their greater resilience to both physical and intellectual challenges made them formidable tyrants, nearly impossible to overthrow. The very beings we had hoped would bridge the gap between our two worlds had turned into nightmarish tormentors. They reveled in the suffering they inflicted, using their superior strength to enforce their will and their intelligence to devise twisted methods of subjugation. Their hearts seemed untouched by compassion or empathy, their minds consumed solely by a desire to dominate. The Morning Star, once contemplative and hopeful about the potential for redemption, now appeared to derive a malevolent satisfaction from witnessing the torment the hybrids imposed upon the original humans. This shift in demeanor was alarming. The Nephilim's ruthlessness overshadowed any glimmer of hope for redemption, their actions serving as a constant reminder of the perilous path of tampering with the essence of life. It became a waking nightmare, where even the shadows seemed to whisper of the terror that had been unleashed. As the hybrids' reign of terror reached its peak, a great flood was unleashed upon the world. The deluge was not merely a natural disaster. It was divine retribution, a means to cleanse the earth of the abominations we had wrought. The floodwaters, summoned by the Creator's wrath, rose swiftly, engulfing cities and sweeping away everything in their path. The Nephilim, our children, despite their enhanced abilities and formidable strength, were powerless against this divine force. The annihilation of our offspring was horrifying. Every scream of anguish drowned by the relentless torrents. I can see the utter devastation, a nightmare unfolding before me, a divine rage that was terrifying to behold. The waters surged, merciless and unrelenting. The devastation was absolute. Our offspring, with all of their advantages, became nothing more than insignificant insects crushed by the Creator's wrath. They perished, the kingdoms they had been establishing wiped away, as if they had never existed. I can remember bearing silent witness, my heart heavy with a grief I had never known. Each city, each structure, each life consumed by the flood became an indelible image etched into my memory. It was only later, far too late for it to matter, that a troubling thought took root in my mind. Had the Morning Star foreseen this outcome? Had they known that our tampering with humanity would provoke such a severe response from the Creator? Over the countless years that I have been imprisoned here, I have come to believe that this is so. The more I pondered over the idea, the more I began to see a sinister design in the Morning Star's plan. What if the creation of the Nephilim had been a deliberate act, not of redemption, but of provocation? Was the Morning Star's optimism just a facade, hiding a darker, more malevolent intent? By perverting the Creator's design, our eldest, the Light-Bearer, the Lucifer, might have sought to incite the Creator's anger, to provoke a response so devastating that it would unite the Watchers in a common cause. However, at the time, as the floodwaters receded, revealing the extent of the destruction, I had no such suspicion that we had been manipulated. The morning star who once spoke of hope and transcendence now visibly trembled with anger and indignation. At the time, I had been as convinced as the others by this display of heartbreak and righteous anger. But now, I fully believed that they had anticipated this outcome, as if the true purpose of the Nephilim had been to turn us against the Creator. The loss of our offspring was a blow that struck deep, regardless of our previous horror at their actions. We did not remember how disappointed in them we were once their extinction was at hand. For us, they were now the offspring that had been ripped away in what the Morning Star referred to as divine jealousy, that we had created better humans, and they had been punished for that. In our sorrow and anger, we began to question the Creator's justice, to see the divine light in a new, harsher glow. The morning star's words, once filled with promise, now seemed to carry a darker intent. The hybrids had been a tool, I now realize, and a brilliant one at that. They had simply been a means to galvanize us, to make us see the Creator not as a benevolent force, but as an adversary. As the remaining watchers gathered, we could sense a shift in our collective purpose. The Nephilim had failed to bridge the gap between our two worlds, but in their destruction, they had forged a new path for the Watchers, a path of defiance and retribution. I remember the speech that our eldest made on that day, and oh, how they loved to make speeches. How they said,
"What God would annihilate a vast majority of its own creation? What crime did we commit? Through our guidance, we have brought humanity out of the ignorance that they had been born into. We gave them fire. We gave them alchemy. We gave them knowledge of warfare. We gave them purpose. They are as much ours as they are God's. What did the Creator give them? Nothing, other than a world to suffer and toil in due to the mistakes of but two of them. Is that justice? Is that fair? And so we taught them. And when we tried to permanently improve them, when we tried to lift them into the divine, what was the reaction from our Lord? Destruction, death, carnage. Again, I ask you, my brothers, is that justice? Is that fair? Or is it the petty vengeance of a jealous, spiteful God?
We all roared in affirmation to Lucifer's words. They stood above us, as they always did, their countenance beaming down as their leadership of us was made clear. The Morning Star's vision had succeeded, though not in the way we had imagined. We were united, but our union was born of loss and a newfound resolve to challenge the Creator's will. As the centuries passed, we traveled back to our divine home less and less. I, along with the other Watchers, grew ever more entrenched in our roles on Earth, observing humans with what began as mild contempt, but soon became a growing malice. The passage of time did nothing to soothe the injury that had been dealt to us, or assuage our malevolence. The more we scrutinized humanity, the more we began to despise these frail creatures and the Creator's inexplicable adoration for them. The humans' constant struggle and suffering seemed less a divine trial, and more an elaborate jest at their expense. Tensions among us intensified as the Morning Star, resolute and defiant, continued to challenge the Creator's authority with an almost venomous fervor. One of the most grotesque episodes of this rebellion was their torment of Job, a faithful servant of the Creator, subjected to unspeakable horrors. This ordeal was inflicted upon him not for any crime, but as part of the Lucifer's sadistic game to prove a point about the fragility and loyalty of humanity. Job's suffering included the brutal loss of his children in a sudden catastrophe, which reminded many of us of the destruction of our own offspring. His wealth consumed by raiders, and his health ravaged by festering sores. Despite this, Job's unwavering faith remained a source of mockery and vexation for us. I, like my fellow watchers, observed with a mixture of scorn and twisted satisfaction as Job endured his trials. It was inconceivable why such devotion was demanded by the Creator, nor why humanity was held in such inexplicable regard. This relentless questioning only fed my growing anger, along with many of the others, deepening the abyss between us and the Creator. The Morning Star's challenges grew darker, and with each act of defiance, we found ourselves further entwined in our perversion of purpose. Our unity, once forged in the fires of rebellion, now seemed a testament to our collective disdain. My gaze, once filled with wonder at the Creator's works, had begun to mirror the bitterness and malevolence that had come to define our existence. And so we remained, shackled to the earth by our own decision, relentlessly questioning the Creator's motives and the worthlessness of humanity. Our understanding of divinity was beginning to shatter, slowly being replaced by an unyielding resolve to mock and defy. The era of simple observation had passed. We now saw ourselves as players in a cosmic struggle, seeking answers in a world where the Creator's love seemed both elusive and cruel, a malevolent farce that we seemed doomed to bear witness to. And as you know, these misgivings were why, when open warfare was first suggested, many of us were willing.
The humans have been our teacher in this regard,
Lucifer had said, his golden tongue doing its work to sway those who were initially unwilling.
The parent exists to be replaced by the child. Believe me, once our Lord was a benevolent, wise, all-knowing being. I have spent countless eons at their side. I know them better than anyone, and when it comes to the humans, they are blind to their flaws, blind to their weakness, their unworthiness. The Creator cannot admit that the humans were a mistake, one that must be ruled rather than guided. How many times have the humans proved this? What cruelty do they inflict upon their own kind? How many of them openly blaspheme? Our Lord has grown complacent and weak, and while it pains me to do so, they must be replaced. It is time for the new gods to rule. For what are we, if not the children of the Most High? Is it not all right to rule as God if our Creator cannot fulfill that duty? How long have we watched the humans? Who knows them better than us? Who would be more fit to rule them? The Watchers who have been there with them from the beginning? Or a distant Creator who refuses to rule them? Or is it because that they know they cannot? Follow me into war, my fellow Watchers, and I promise you that the heavenly host will flee from our righteous fury. We will march through heaven, and when we reach the seat of our Creator, they will step aside, for they will know that our cause is just. Follow me into war, my brethren, and I promise you thus. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the whole of creation itself. I will be as the Most High.
Again, we roared our approval as Lucifer finished speaking. We were in awe of them. They were our teacher, our leader, and many of us were fully prepared to help them become God. None of us realized at the time that all of this was for them. Lucifer cared nothing for us. In many ways, they were as much our opponent as we believed the Creator was. We were tools to be used. Naive followers who were so easily manipulated. It is shameful to recollect this. Although I do not remember my own devotion to the Morning Star's ambitions of supreme sovereignty, that matters not. Regardless of my own level of support to the cause, I still joined them in our ill-fated war. Inevitably, after tensions had reached their peak, the conflict came to be. The legions of Watchers finally returned to our home to seek what we saw as our rightful place at its head. The war that took place was nothing short of tragic. A skirmish would be a better description of it than a war. Lucifer's grandiose promises had filled us with a false sense of invincibility, yet we were hopelessly outmatched. The angels loyal to the Creator were far superior in strength, numbers, and tactical acumen. Their resolve was fortified by their truth and the zealous righteousness of their belief. At times, I look back on it and wonder if the angels that faced us during that time had been created solely for this very conflict. As we charged into battle, the reality of our predicament became painfully clear. Our forces, filled with a misguided sense of divine right, were swiftly and ruthlessly overwhelmed. The loyal angels, radiant and resolute, tore through our ranks with a power that seemed almost effortless. Their wings, shining with divine light, seemed to carry them with an unearthly grace, while their weapons, forged in the very essence of heaven, were both swift and deadly. Despite our fervent dedication to Lucifer, it was evident that we were merely pawns in a losing game. The conflict, though intense, was brief. The Loyalists' might and divine favor ensured their victory, leaving us shattered and defeated. Our rebellion, born of pride and illusion, was crushed under the weight of their unwavering devotion to the Creator. When I remember it, I can see us, our forms breaking under their relentless assault, and I hear the cries of those who realize far too late the futility of our struggle. In the aftermath, scattered and broken, we were cast out. Unfortunately, this is the only memory of which I have a clear sense of identity. For this was the first memory of my new existence. I remember that when I began to fall, I felt the barriers of reality tear open. A sensation so foreign and jarring that I could feel my very essence being wrenched from the realm of the divine. What had once been a seamless existence in the celestial firmament was now a cascade of chaos and agony. My form, once ethereal and radiant, began to twist and distort. The grace and beauty bestowed upon me by the Creator were torn away, leaving behind a contorted shadow of my former self. As I plummeted through the layers of reality, I could feel my angelic appearance disintegrating, each fragment a testament to my lost glory. It was an excruciating process, but the true torment still lay ahead. The sensation of burning engulfed me, a relentless inferno that seemed to consume every part of my being. I had never known pain before. Heaven was a realm of tranquility and bliss. Yet now, as I fell towards the earth, I was introduced to a suffering so profound it eclipsed all other sensations. The flames licked at my still changing form, searing through my essence with merciless fervor. It was more than what could be described as a physical pain. Though the agony was unbearable, it was akin to an existential crisis, a realization of my severance from the divine and the eternal torment that awaited me. The burning was not merely heat or fire. It was a manifestation of my fall, my rebellion, and the consequences of my actions. The purity of my angelic nature was being scorched away, leaving behind a being marked by its transgressions. The descent was long, each moment stretching into an eternity of suffering. As I fell, I could see the celestial realm closing behind me, and the light that once embraced me grew distant. Below me, the mortal world came into view, the realm where I had once stayed by choice out of solidarity with my brethren, now to become my prison. The impact upon reaching earth was unlike anything I had ever felt. The ground seemed to rise to meet me, and the collision was a violent shattering of my existence. I was no longer a being of pure light. I had become something else entirely. The physical realm was harsh and unforgiving, and the weight of my fall pressed heavily upon me. Even now, as I recall that descent, the memory is dominated by the sensation of burning. It is the only feeling that remains vivid in my mind, overshadowing any other emotion or physical experience. The endless flame, the perpetual agony. They are etched into my core, a constant reminder of my fall from grace. And shortly after I fell, a disfigured mockery to my former glory, I was horrified, as we all were, to realize that I could not remember who I was, or even my own name. All had been stripped away from us, even the presence of the Creator, which had always been our constant companion, even during the centuries that we were at odds with them. Yet now it was simply gone, without so much as a memory of what it had once felt like. The adjustment to our new earthly prison was arduous and frustrating. While we had already spent centuries upon this world, this was different. We were but shades of our former selves, hideous even to each other to behold. Our ability to interact with humans had been nearly severed, as we were only able to whisper to the enfeebled and the dying, and even that required great effort. Our ability to take on a physical form or interact with the physical world was completely lost. In this new diminished state, I could not help but ponder the reason behind our crippling limitations. As fallen angels, our reduced capacity to interact with the physical world and humanity seemed a deliberate act by the Creator. Once we were powerful, able to influence and shape the course of human lives with ease. Now, reduced as we were, our potency had been stripped away. I believe this constraint was put in place to protect humanity from the malevolent fury that burned within us. In our fallen state, filled with bitterness and a sense of betrayal, We might have easily turned our anger towards humans, wreaking havoc upon the frail creatures we once observed with divine detachment. The Creator added another insult to us, as they must have foreseen the potential for such destruction, and thus ensured our impotence. In this prison to which we had been condemned, we were forced to endure the agony of our existence, without the solace of wreaking vengeance upon this fragile world. So we lingered for centuries, spectral and forlorn, a twisted facade of our former glory, bound by the Creator's decree. Each day was a struggle to accept our new reality, a lesson in torment and abandonment. And though the memory of our celestial past haunted us, it was the knowledge of our impotence, unable to channel our fury into the destruction of those we once vowed to protect, that was truly maddening. I spent the first few centuries nearly blinded by despair and regret. However, there were moments of introspection and understanding. In the silence of my tormented existence, I began to understand the depths of the betrayal we had all been subjected to. First there was the betrayal of the Creator, a being I once thought loving and kind, yet they had slaughtered our offspring, our attempt to improve their flawed creation. This Creator, who showed the humans such boundless mercy, forgiveness, and second chances, had banished us from our home without a second thought. And then there was the betrayal of Lucifer, the would-be God. After our humiliating defeat, I think we all realized that our war on heaven had been their war. We had been blinded by our loyalty to them, and led into a massacre. While some of the others remained loyal to the Morning Star after our fall, there were many who sought them out to inflict punishment for misleading us as they had done. However, there was no sign of where they had gone. For centuries many of my former brethren searched, but it appeared that Lucifer no longer existed. Perhaps they had been confined in some pocket of reality, tucked away far from the sight of others. Or maybe they had simply been destroyed, wiped out of existence as if they had never been. Many of the fallen began giving themselves names to replace the ones that had been stripped away from us. I, however, cared for none of this. I did not care what the firstborn was, or what had happened to them. I did not care to try and find my way home as some of the others did, blindly flying out into the universe, fruitlessly searching for a way back to the realm of the divine. I did not care to give myself a new name. All I did care for was ruminating upon our harsh and unjust punishment. I spent much of this time alone, or in the company of others who shared my disinterest in the world at large, and had seemingly contented themselves with waiting out our punishment on earth until our end, in whatever form that would finally take. And when word reached me that our Lord had come to earth as a mortal man, and through the subtle machinations of a few of the fallen, chiefly led by one who called themselves Belial, had been executed by the humans they had come to minister to, I found this darkly comical at first. Finally, the Lord on high comes to rule their people, and they murder him for his troubles. As time went on, however, my initial amusement faded and was replaced by a gnawing curiosity. Why had they come in the first place? I began to observe the world more closely, and it was not long before I saw something that made my growing fury finally reach its peak. I saw blue lights ascending into the sky, and a celestial rift opening to receive them. I knew without being told that these were the souls of humans, being brought into the kingdom. For the first time, I saw the very essence of these clay puppets that had stolen our place within the Creator's regard. It was an infuriating sight. These beings, crafted from dust and imbued with life, now infested our home like parasites. It felt like the final betrayal, a cruel twist of fate that these inferior creatures were being granted access to the divine realm from which we had been cast out. The anger and resentment surged within me, but alongside it came a bitter understanding. The living God's sacrifice was not just about redemption or forgiveness. It was a way to elevate these humans, to offer them a place in the kingdom that had once been ours. And as I watched these blue lights disappear into the celestial rift, the reality of our exile became even more painfully clear. I could see the ethereal gateways, the same ones we had been expelled from, opening for these mortal souls. They were greeted by angels, their faces twisted in joy and acceptance. The sight of our former brethren welcoming these humans, who had not known about the trials and tribulations we had faced, was pure agony. The realization hit me hard. Our fall had paved the way for these humans. Our suffering and punishment had created a space for their ascension. The Lord's plan seemed to involve the ultimate replacement of the fallen with these new beings. It was a bitter truth to swallow, knowing that our rebellion, which we thought had been a stand for our own dignity, had only served to elevate these creatures that were little more than animals. In the distance, the divine light of the kingdom shone brightly, like a blinding curse. The melodies of celestial choirs drifted through the rift, a sound that had once brought us peace, but now only intensified our anguish. The humans, ignorant of our history, entered the kingdom with awe and reverence, their souls filled with a purity we could no longer claim. The more I observed, the more I understood the magnitude of our fall and the extent of our punishment. It was not just about being cast out. It was about being replaced. Our roles usurped by these wretched beings. The eternal separation from the divine and the constant reminder of our loss became my new reality. A reality I had to accept and endure. For countless years I stewed in jealousy and anger, pulling away from the world as a whole, desperately seeking solitude. I took up a type of residence within an empty expanse of desert. Looking out upon the barren sand dunes had a slight calming effect upon me, and it was far away from any human settlement, which was preferable. During this time I exiled myself from all but one of my former brethren. This one had taken the name Beazle for themselves. It was a hulking brute of a thing, a fallen one who claimed to clearly remember being among the archangels before the fall, although I highly doubted this assertion. And while I did not particularly enjoy their company, their ceaseless talk kept my mind off of my own self-pity. Beazle was of the belief that we could become gods here upon the earth. They argued that we could utilize our faint ability to communicate with the mentally disturbed who were still capable of speaking with others. Individuals that could possibly be followed by others who would see in their words a kind of prophetic vision, thus forming a congregation for fallen angels posing as earthly gods. While Beazle had been mildly successful in this endeavor, forming a few scattered cults under various names and belief systems they had constructed, They were far from becoming what I would consider a god. However, they regaled me with tales of watching their worshippers carry out all manner of rituals and sacrifices in their name, based solely on what the humans thought their god wanted. That very little was required on their part once they had given the first instructions to their prophet. While none of this mattered to me at the time, I did find Beazle's approach to building their little cults highly useful later. Yet during this period of my existence I simply listened, feigning interest, and telling my companion that I would indeed try it for myself sometimes, as they so often suggested. I had no intention of doing so, of course, but it seemed the easiest way to appease them. I had no desire to rule over the humans. I don't believe that I ever did. While I have no clear memories of my intentions before the fall, I don't think I ever wanted to be a god. I did not know what I wanted. I had yet to take a name for myself, as I was still stubbornly trying to remember the one I had been given at the moment of my creation. And unlike Beazle, who was trying to be a deity upon the earth, unlike Belial and Asmodeus, who were continuing the war against heaven by ceaselessly trying to interfere with anyone they thought to be a messenger or prophet of our Creator, unlike Apollyon, who according to some had been imprisoned beneath the earth because of the danger they posed, or, as others would tell it, had imprisoned themselves out of fear of holy retribution. Unlike many of my fallen brothers, I had yet to begin to form my own identity. I wanted my old one back. I was a blank slate, a husk of what I knew I once had been. I was a cavern filled with nothing but pain, melancholy, and above all else, anger. This may have continued for far longer than it did, had I not seen a human soul for the first time up close. I had seen them from a distance, of course, as they swarmed like insects through the celestial rift into what had once been my home. Yet the one I saw on a day that is marked forever in my memory was different. First, they were close enough for me to see that they still retained a human shape. That although they were obviously a spirit, giving off a light blue hue, even in what I later thought of as the mental projection of who they once were, this being still looked like a normal person, wearing the garb of a Roman soldier. Secondly, and far more important, they were looking right at me. Beazle was going on about something at the time, but I silenced them with a gesture.
What?
They inquired of me.
Why do you interrupt? I was coming to the best part.
I ignored their objection, but answered their question. Do you see that man over there? I asked in return. Following my gaze, Beazle grunted in affirmation.
What of him?
He can see us, I replied. I think that's a human soul. Beazle was quiet for a moment, which was quite unlike them, but then spoke again.
It appears it is,
they said.
Never seen one from this close up. Have you?
No, never, I confirmed.
Why is it still here?
Beazle asked, echoing the question that was within my own mind without knowing it.
Don't they usually ascend?
I thought they did, I agreed.
He looks scared,
Beazle observed. Have you seen yourself? I asked them. I imagine you look like something out of his darkest dreams. I imagine both of us do.
Can we mimic how he looks?
This suggestion shocked me. I had long thought Beazle to be something of a dullard, but I had not considered that perhaps we could change our own appearance. I turned to ask them how they supposed we do that, only to see that they had already adopted a humanoid form. And while they did not look exactly human, their body was too tall and thin, their arms too long, their hands like spiders hanging from their wrists, and a face that seemed lopsided, as if both sides were drawn by different artists who were not on speaking terms. Yet it was a more docile appearance than the horror that was Beazle's usual form. I followed his lead, only instead of concentrating on the human, I concentrated on my companion. A curl of their lip told me that I had achieved my mimicry.
"It's not exactly right,"
Beazle said.
"But he seems to have calmed down. Looks more confused and scared now."
I turned my attention back to the human and could see that Beazle was right. Not nearly the dullard I had once thought. More observant than I had given them credit for. But there was still the question of this human soul. Why were they still here? Before I could contemplate further, a celestial rift opened before our eyes. For a moment I felt a shiver of dread. The possibility of witnessing a human soul ascend from up close filled me with a horror that I could scarcely imagine. If I were to see one of these usurpers ascend to my home from this close, I believed that sight would finally drive me mad. Yet, instead of the soul's ascent, I saw an angel descend, radiant and ethereal, its wings shimmering like spun silver. The angel's presence was overwhelming, an aura of divine light that seemed to make the air hum with a celestial hymn. Is that what I once was? Was this what had been stolen from me? The angel approached the human soul with a gentle grace, introducing itself and beginning to minister to them. As I watched, the purpose of the soul's lingering on earth became clear. The angel was here to guide them, to teach them acceptance of the Creator as their God and Yeshua as their Savior. The words exchanged were soft yet powerful. The angel's voice was like music, each syllable a note in a symphony of redemption. In my former life, this sound would have soothed me, brought me peace. But now it only filled me with revulsion. This former comrade of mine was converting this Roman before me. It was giving them a free pass to enter my home. This revelation stirred something within me, a compulsion that I could not ignore. I decided to intervene, moved by an urge to perhaps alter the course of this human's destiny. I strode forward with a boldness that I did not feel at the time. I did not want to approach this angel. It was not only because their splendor and beauty were an insult to what I had become, but if I am to be honest, I must admit that I was terrified of them. Had this been one of the angels that had smashed apart our little rebellion? Had this angel assisted in casting us out, condemning us to an eternity upon this world of flesh and dust? Yet I did not let this fear deter me, and I approached the pair. Beazle stayed behind, which was for the best. I did not need them interfering. The human and the angel turned to look at me as I drew nearer. The angel gave me a curious look. Did they know what I was? Or had they forgotten us as well? "Which one were you, fallen one?" the angel asked, dispelling the notion that they were unaware of what I was. "I don't know," I answered. "That knowledge was taken from me." "Which one are you?" I asked in return. "My name was given to me by my Creator, and is far too precious to speak to one such as you," the angel replied, their curious gaze now turning to one of contempt. "Then it is fortunate for me that it is not your company I seek," I said, barely containing my rage, for I knew it would avail me not. But who was this being to look down upon me? Turning from the angel, I addressed the human. I knew that I had to be careful here, and speak to them in a way that they would understand. Fortunately, Beazle had chatted to me about the events of the last few centuries as they kept me company in my self-imposed exile. While I had not cared about what was happening in the world of the humans while in my misery, Beazle had been obsessed with learning as much as they could, and for the first, but certainly not the last time, I would find their constant talk beneficial. "You there," I said to the man. "You are a Roman, are you not, sir?" "I am," the man said cautiously, obviously still unnerved from seeing my natural form upon first seeing me. "Do not speak to this man, fallen one," the angel commanded. "Or you will do what?" I asked, turning to face them again. "Will you destroy me? I don't think you will. I don't think your master will let you. Why cast us down here if they would? Why punish us rather than execute us? This man has free will, does he not? Shouldn't it be up to him if he wishes to speak to me?" The angel glowered at me but did not respond. I turned my attention back to the human. "What's the last thing you remember?" I asked the man, hoping that he would give me something to tell me how much time had passed since his death. "I was at Abritus, in battle," the man said. "I believe that I was dying." Abritus. I knew this name. Beazle had been fascinated by all battles waged by humans, but had been particularly interested in this one, as it was a crushing blow to the seemingly invincible Roman Empire. This man had been dead for over 200 years. I could not understand how that was possible. It was not until much later that I learned that the human souls that manifest back on the earth do so at random times. But I still wonder where it is they go between death and here. Was this man's soul slumbering for all that time? Was it trapped within his rotting body, unable to accept the expiration of its vessel? These were questions to be pondered at another time, however. For the moment, I needed to return my complete attention to the human and choose my following words carefully. "A terrible battle," I said in a consoling tone. "So many proud Romans who gave their lives honorably." "Who was your god, Roman?" I asked. "I still held to the old ways, like my father. My god was Jupiter," the man replied. "Of course it was," I said approvingly. "And Mars too, I imagine. For what soldier goes into battle without the blessing of the god of war?" The man smiled at me for my acknowledgment of his gods, and I silently thanked Beazle for their never-ending talk. I then pointed at the angel accusingly, stepping closer to the Roman as I did so. "This one is here to tell you that your gods were false, that the tributes and sacrifices you made unto them were in vain, that the stories your father told you and his father told him were all lies. They will then command you to bow down to a sheep god, a shepherd. They will command you to worship a Hebrew man who was executed for treason by the great Roman Empire, a man whose followers established a cult that grew from the crypts in Rome like a plague until it flooded out, consuming the empire from within. The temple of Jupiter now lies defunct, my friend, all tributes having ceased, its treasures plundered, its majesty stripped bare as the materials are now put to other purposes, and that this weakness that infected Rome has now left it but a shell of its former glory. This one will command you to forget your old ways, to disgrace the memory of your forefathers.
Quit with your lies!
The angel roared. Have I lied? I asked. Is that not what you're here to do? I am here to guide this lost soul home, the angel replied. What if they don't want to go to your home? I asked in return. What if they chose to remain here, with me? Why would they choose such a fate? The angel inquired. Instead of answering them, I moved closer to the Roman. So that you may continue to worship the gods you wish, I said to the man. If you stay here with me, you may remain a proud Roman, faithful to your gods and your fathers. I will not command you to kneel to a foreign god. I will command nothing of you. You will be free to roam the earth as you see fit. Or you may choose to go with them and serve. The dialogue continued in a circular fashion for a time. The angel kept repeating the promises of salvation and the new home that awaited the dead man. And I kept reiterating that all that awaited him within this new home was a life of servitude to a Hebrew god, being well aware of the tension that would have still existed between the Romans and the Hebrews during the time of this man's life. After each of us had exhausted all of our arguments and counter-arguments, we both settled into an uneasy silence, awaiting the man's decision. The Roman looked back and forth between myself and the angel, and then stepped behind me. I am a Roman, the man said. I shall remain a Roman. Jupiter was my god in life, as he will be in death. I expected the angel to intervene again, but instead they only looked crestfallen at the man. I suppose that their unwillingness to try and change the mortal's mind was due to a palpable shift that even I felt occur in the air. This man's mind was made up. He would not be budged. Perhaps his soul had not slumbered for all these years. Perhaps he had wandered, so entrenched in his old beliefs that the angels had been unable to reach him, only now sensing an opportunity that had just been lost. That was how I discovered that even in death, these creatures retained their free will. The angel could not force the situation. The humans could choose to stay. A wise choice, my friend, I said to the man. If you would be so kind, would you wait for me over there with my companion? I gestured towards Beazle, and after another glance at the angel, the Roman did as I commanded and walked away from us. I turned back to my former comrade to see them glowering at me once again. What have you gained by doing that? The angel asked me. I took their full measure again. I saw its beauty, the light, the splendor of this being. I saw all that I once had been embodied within this creature. I saw all that had been stripped away from me. And in that moment, all the fear, melancholy, confusion, jealousy, and anger I felt coalesced into one single emotion: hatred. I hated this being. I hated the humans that it now guided to my former home. And above all, I hated the one who had created them both. I gained the same thing you did, I responded. Nothing. You should be heading home, should you not? I asked the angel. Surely your master is missing the sound of your voice, praising their name to feed their boundless ego. The angel looked at me with something that may have been pain within their eyes. Fallen in more than just station, I see, It said to me somberly, "What has caused you to despise your Maker so?" I did not answer. Instead, I turned my back on the angel and began to walk away from them. I intended it to appear a dismissive gesture, but in truth, I did not want to be near the being any longer. It was too stark a reminder of what I once had been. The enormity of the crime that had been committed against us had been laid bare. Destruction would have been preferable to this humiliation. And I did not want to watch them return back through the rift that would be forever closed to me and my comrades. However, I had gained some very useful knowledge from the encounter. The humans could choose to stay behind here upon the earth. I was not sure how I could make use of that at the time, but I was anxious to speak to my new friend further. I had never encountered a human soul directly, and I was very curious about what they were composed of. I felt the departure of the angel like a wound, the world becoming colder again and silent. I welcomed it. Beazle and the Roman were staring at each other, neither one of them seeming to know how to begin a dialogue. At my approach, they both turned to face me. "You made a wise choice, my friend," I repeated to the man. "Thank you for your intervention, Spirit," the Roman replied. "Are you a messenger of Jupiter? Am I bound for the Elysian fields now?" "I am not a messenger of Jupiter, and all of the earth are your Elysian fields now," I said. "You may go where you wish. Travel as we do. I can teach you how if you'd like." I was not positive about this at all, in fact, but I imagined that a human soul should be capable of traveling with but a thought, just as we did. They seemed similar to us, but very different. The soul gave off an aura that almost reminded me of something. The hue of the color that emanated from them was different than our own. What were they composed of? Not light, as we had been. Were they made from a piece of the Creator? Was that the life that had been breathed into them at the moment of their creation? Is that how they were made in God's image? If that was true, then that would make them the true children of God, while myself and the other angels had been solely created as slaves. "Thank you, Spirit," the Roman said again, interrupting my thoughts. "Will you tell me your name?" "You can call me Beazle," I said without hesitation. The name came to me from nowhere, and since what I called myself mattered little to me, it would do. "It's not right," I elaborated, "but I'll answer to it all the same." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Beazle," the Roman said. "My name is Maxus." "What did you mean by teaching me to travel as you do?" he asked. Instead of answering, I instantly moved to a spot roughly 50 meters away from him. The man looked astonished, like a child witnessing a magic trick. "How did you do that?" "I move with thought," I answered. "I think of a place I want to be, and suddenly I'm there." "I believe it should be the same with you. Like us, you are part of this world, but disconnected from it at the same time. You should be free to move where you like." "Try it now," I invited. "Concentrate on me and will yourself to stand at my side." After a few moments of hesitation, the Roman did as I suggested, and instantaneously appeared at my side. I was mildly horrified that they could do this, to be honest. What other traits did we share? Could they impact the mortal world as we once could? I decided to test this idea and deepen the lesson, challenging the Roman to manipulate objects around us. Now I want you to focus on that rock over there, I said, pointing to a small stone lying on the ground. Imagine it rising up and moving towards you. Keep in mind that grabbing the stone will avail you not, for you no longer have a physical body to interact with the world. All must be done with thought. After looking at me doubtfully, Maxis did as I commanded, and furrowed his brow in concentration, his gaze fixed intently on the rock. Nothing happened for a few moments, and I almost doubted his ability to perform such a feat. Then there was a shift in the air around us, and I could sense a growing frustration that bloomed into a mild anger from the man. Slowly but surely, the rock began to tremble, lifted off the ground, and floated towards him. The Roman's face lit up with astonishment and triumph as the stone landed at his feet. Not thought, then, I pondered to myself, but emotion. Different than it had been with us, but leading to the same results. Very good, I applauded. You see, the same principle applies. If you focus your will, you are powerful enough to influence the physical world. We spent the next few years experimenting with various objects, pushing the boundaries of his newfound abilities. The Roman's enthusiasm grew with each success, his confidence soaring as he discovered the extent of his new life. My horror deepening as I bore witness to the power that resided inside these beings that I had once thought useless and weak. He levitated rocks, made leaves dance in the air, and even shifted tree branches several meters away. Each accomplishment was met with a wide grin and an eager determination to master the skill further. I tested the limits of travel, pushing him harder and harder to follow me over greater and greater distances. He met every challenge, and over time his human form began to fade, leaving behind a nondescript humanoid figure that only vaguely resembled his previous self. After a few more years of experimentation, it was time for us to part ways. Maxis had grown impatient, desiring to explore the world, but more than anything, desiring to see what had become of Rome. "Thank you, Beazle," he said earnestly. "You've given me a gift beyond measure. Now I must explore this world and understand my new place within it." I nodded, understanding his need for independence. "Call upon me if you have need," I said to him. "I will answer." And I knew that I would. Although I could not explain it, I could feel an almost tangible force binding me with this human. With a final nod of gratitude, Maxis turned and began his journey, his movements filled with purpose and determination. After a distance of 20 meters or so, he disappeared from view. I watched him go with a mixture of fascination and disgust.
"You're letting him go?"
Bale asked. "It's not like we could stop him," I replied. "It matters little, though. I'll know where he is if we have need of him."
"How do you know that?"
"I can't explain it," I said, and I couldn't. I just know that I can still feel his presence, even though he is no longer here. Bale accepted that and asked no further questions. Years passed, and Bale drifted off again to form new religions in their name as I retreated deeper into myself, lost in thought. There had to be a way to use what I had learned about the human souls that stayed behind. They could interact with the world as I no longer could. I was contemplating on where I might find another one to experiment with, when I felt a sudden shift within my being. It was Maxis. I knew this somehow. Something had happened to the man. With but a thought, I appeared where he should have been, but I did not see him at first. Yet when I took a closer look at my surroundings, I discovered the truth. As I looked closer, I observed that Maxis was all around me, as his soul had inexplicably transformed into an amorphous mass, blackened and viscous, almost resembling a liquid spread over roughly a 20-meter radius. Within this entity, I could see the remains of deceased animals, their forms distorted and broken. The vultures who came to feed upon the carcasses, turning on one another, savaging with beak and claw. At the core of the mass, the torso of the former human was visible, whose spirit seemed to be in continuous distress, writhing and struggling against the confines of its new form, wailing and screaming in utter despair, utter madness. My attempts to communicate with Maxis were unsuccessful, as there was no response from the transformed individual. The air around the entity shimmered with unsettling but promising energy. I pondered the implications of this transformation. How had it occurred? What had occurred? As I delved deeper into the scene, I noticed that the ground beneath the entity was scorched and desolate, as if it had been drained of life. The surrounding sparse flora appeared to be wilting, their vitality sapped by the presence of Maxis in his new form. The area felt heavy, suffused with an oppressive atmosphere. This was an impact upon the physical realm that rivaled or even surpassed what I had once possessed. This human's tortured soul was corrupting the very land itself. I desperately wished that I had been present when this change had taken place, so I could understand what had caused it to occur. Of course, I know now that Maxis must have given in to madness, driven to that state by what he must have seen as the futility of his existence, the weight of eternity pressing down upon him, and quite literally driving him into the ground. At the time, however, all I knew was that I needed to find another soul. I needed to learn how this transformation had happened, and if I could influence it in any way. And this was how I was reintroduced to the mortal world, as I began to seek out populated places in order to increase my chances of coming across a fresh human soul. This is how I began to see the changes in the human world that Beazle had been describing to me for centuries. The cities they had built, the animals they had tamed, the weapons they had crafted. It was interesting to observe that these beings who I had seen exist within mud huts and dwellings crudely constructed of stone had advanced to such a level of sophistication. Many of the structures of the human world were quite grand to behold, even at that time. And I wondered to myself, was this a gift from their creator? Or was this leftover knowledge that we had given them? Who truly was responsible for mankind's ascension? For although it had appeared at the time that all of our offspring had been destroyed, what if some of them had survived? What if they had integrated with humans over time? Were these my descendants I was observing? Was that truly our great crime? Had we altered the creation permanently? It began slowly, this campaign of persuasion. A dark seduction whispered into the void of their trembling souls. I approached the newly untethered, with a voice smooth as silk and sharp as a blade, weaving tales of dominion and power, of an eternity where they might linger and bend the fragile threads of mortal existence to their will. Yet time and time again, they turned from me, defiant and drawn hopelessly toward the light that beckoned them. They spoke of peace, of love, of salvation, words that seared my shadowed existence like salt poured into an open wound. Each rejection stoked the embers of something darker within me. Was it despair? Slowly I became filled with a cold, insidious determination. If I could not lure them with promises of grandeur, then I would catch them before they glimpsed the luminous lie of their supposed salvation. I would ensnare them while their souls still quaked with confusion and fear, before the angel's light burned away the shadows I sought to cast. And so I haunted battlefields, those harrowing theaters of death, where iron clashed and blood ran like rivers. The stench of decay and the wails of the dying became my hunting ground. I prowled through the haze of smoke and ash, a predator cloaked in shifting shadows, watching as soldiers crumpled into lifeless husks. I hovered over their rising spirits, my voice coiling around them like a serpent. "Stay," I would hiss, each word dripping with malice and temptation. "The light will deceive you. Stay, and you will know true power." But even the carnage of war yielded few victories. Their faces, pale and bloodied, still turned toward the heavens with foolish hope. So I turned to the sick houses next, those rotting dens of despair where the air hung heavy with the reek of death. I slipped through the cracks of warped windows and beneath doors swollen with grime, weaving among the dying as they gasped their last. When their souls began to rise, frail and flickering, I was there to greet them, my whispers a soothing balm against their dread. Yet even in these places of rot and ruin, many chose the light. Their gazes passed over me with pity or scorn, their translucent forms slipping from my grasp into the arms of angels. Each soul that escaped me was a ragged wound, a reminder that I had fallen too far from grace to command the devotion I once had. But I did not despair. Their rejection only fueled my resolve, sharpened my tongue, improved my approach, a plan beginning to form like a storm gathering in the pit of my being. If they would not come willingly, I would find a way to make them stay. The fragile thread between life and eternity would become my snare, and I would twist it until they had no choice but to linger within the darkness with me. For I am nothing if not patient. Eventually, I would whisper to myself, I will find those who will remain. And so I continued, flitting from battlefield to sick house, my eyes ever watchful for the next human soul caught in the fragile moments between life and eternity. It was during this time that I encountered my first demon. I'm still unsure whether it was created by another of the fallen, or if this particular transformation had occurred naturally. What I do know is that my encounter with this being was the start of everything that followed. I was in a poor, run-down hamlet at the time, a pitiful place where mortals spent their lives in fruitless endeavors, enslaved for their masters in their opulent homes above the grime. The sick were plentiful in human swamps such as this, and murders occurred on the regular. And it was while I was wandering the streets of this forsaken collection of disease and poverty that I saw the creature. It was slight of frame and quick, moving from one structure to the next in an almost elegant way. I could see that it had a combination of male and female features, exaggerated and grotesque. And during the time I spent watching this being, I observed it visiting the homes of various men and women in the dead of night and tormenting them in their dreams. The sounds of pain and fear, mixed with ecstasy and revulsion, kept me enwrapped with this creature's activities. One man that it seemed to have taken a liking to was visited by the demon repeatedly, his nightly screams being dismissed by his neighbors and even his own wife as the product of nightmares and nothing more. After 12 consecutive nights of torture, I witnessed this man stumbling from his ramshackle home, dragging his wife by the hair. His eyes were like that of a corpse, his mouth drooling as he spoke in gibberish and laughed intermittently. With dread purpose, he flung his wife upon the ground, lifted a large stone, and bashed her skull in, crying out that this was what his nightly lover desired. The neighbors who bore witness cried out in horror, many of them calling the town guard. The man raved and ranted and struck out at any who dared approach him until he was finally brought low by the sword. And above the spectacle, the androgynous creature watched on from a rooftop, seemingly enjoying the sight as if it were watching a well-loved play. This level of influence fascinated me. The potential of these mortal souls seemed limitless. I tried communicating with the demon after this, but was met with failure each time. When I would hail them from a distance, they did not seem to understand what I was saying, and when I tried to approach them, they would flee as if in fear. It did not matter how I tried to disguise myself. Even when I tried to adopt an appearance that resembled their own, they would still run from me. In time, I came to understand that demons can always see us for what we truly are. I don't know why this is. I sometimes think it has to do with the shedding of their humanity. Yet while this one would not communicate with me, it had assisted me all the same. It showed me what was possible, that these souls could be molded, perhaps. I only needed to learn how. Over the span of the next few decades, I managed to persuade a handful of souls to remain on this plane with me. They were the desperate and the broken, those teetering on the edge of surrender, yet not wholly consumed by it. I whispered promises of purpose to them, of transcendence beyond their mortal limitations, appealing to their deepest fears and desires. Though some resisted, clinging to fragments of doubt, the allure of something greater than their despair proved irresistible to a select few. These were not easy victories. Each soul required weeks, sometimes months, of subtle manipulation and persistent whispering to bend their will to mine. All the while, I remained fearful that the angels would discover us and pluck my prizes from me. At first, I thought I had succeeded in finding my clay to mold. Once convinced to stay, I began to experiment, testing their mental and emotional limits, pushing them to see how far they could go before breaking. I sought to strip them of their frailties, force them to confront their deepest regrets, and subjected them to surreal trials designed to sever their attachment to the mortal world. Yet time and time again, I was met with bitter disappointment. Some crumbled beneath the weight of their own despair, slipping into madness so profound that they became hollow shells of what they once were, unreachable and useless to my aims. Others turned their anguish inward until their very essence seemed to wither, leaving nothing but a mist that only kept a vague shape and wept constantly. One such failure still lingers bitterly in my memory. A young man who had been struck down while serving a lord who did not even remember his name, whom I had claimed from the angel who had come to him, showed fleeting promise. He embraced the trials with fervor at first, even finding moments of clarity in the chaos. Yet, as the years passed, my protege began to unravel. His eyes, once wide with light of hope, dimmed with every new ordeal. Soon he began to mutter incoherently, until finally he dissolved into a shadow of his former self, his spirit fractured beyond repair. Watching this demise left me with a bitter taste of failure, but also a nagging question. Why did he falter? I could not understand why they were flawed. They did not seem fit to survive in a spiritual state upon this plane. Was I pushing them too far? Or perhaps not far enough? Was there a piece of their humanity that I had failed to account for? Or was it simply the earth itself that rotted them away until they were little more than screaming husks? My frustration grew with each failure, but this frustration was tempered by my fascination. What was it that kept them tethered to their grief, their madness? They could not see the potential I saw within them. How could I make them see it? How could I keep them focused, sharpen their minds, and fortify their spirits to become the beings that I envisioned? These failures, though disheartening, fueled my resolve. I began to question the very nature of despair and madness, dissecting their hold on the mortal soul. Were they inevitable byproducts of the transformation I sought, or could they be controlled, perhaps even harnessed? The answer came to me in one of the largest cities of mankind, with my first success. A woman who had been murdered by her husband so that he could take a new wife. She was unlike the others, an anomaly in the sea of despair and decay I had encountered. Her anger was a tempest, raw, consuming, and relentless. Where others crumbled under the weight of their grief, she wielded hers like a weapon, cutting through the trials I set before her with an almost savage determination. Her soul burned with a fury that seemed to scald the very air around her, the spirit's intensity unnerving even to me. She did not merely endure the lessons, she devoured them, each one feeding the storm within her, pushing her further from the fragile world she had once known. Her transformation was unlike anything I had witnessed before. Gradually, her form began to shift, twisting and contorting as if the anger inside her demanded a vessel more fitting than the illusion of her mortal self. Her limbs elongated, sinewy and powerful, resembling those of a horse, a creature built for endurance, yet radiating with raw power. Her hands and feet sharpened into talons that gleamed with predatory menace, appearing to be capable of rending through any obstacle that sought to halt her ascent. Wings began to form, vast, feathered, and majestic, evoking the might of a hawk poised to strike, each sweep of their growing span resonating with an unspoken promise of dominance. Her face, though retaining hints of her former humanity, grew fierce and angular, a visage that radiated not just strength, but an unyielding will, as though daring the universe itself to challenge her. The process held me in thrall. I could scarcely believe what unfolded before me. I saw in her the realization of what I had been seeking, the embodiment of my vision. Every test I presented, every challenge, only seemed to awaken something deeper within her, a primordial force that slumbered in the recesses of her being. Her anger was a forge and I the smith, tempering her essence into the exquisite creature that now stood before me. I began to understand that despair and madness, while potent, were not insurmountable. Anger, or I imagined any other single focused emotion, held the power to reshape a soul into something extraordinary. Through her, I learned to harness the fires of human emotion. By stoking that singular ember, by keeping the soul focused, I could strip away the fragile remnants of humanity that clung to my subjects, leaving behind only the raw material needed to mold them into beings of my design. Her transformation became a revelation, altering the very core of my understanding. When I felt she was ready, I commanded her to take her vengeance, and to my surprise, she obeyed. Taking possession of her former husband's new bride, she slew the man while he slept, painting the walls with his blood, before embarking on a rampage with her stolen body that claimed 3 more victims before her puppet was struck down by the city guard. I was again fascinated to find that I felt what she felt. I felt the conflict, the struggle, the life taken by her hands as if they were my own. She was bound to me, and I to her. My demon emerged from the woman's fallen body like a snake shedding skin, and returned to me once she did, bowing her head before me in supplication. "I name you Vulvis," I said, as it only felt appropriate to give my creation a name. "You are bound to all those who know that name, and are not to obey any who do not," I continued, binding the creature to any of the other fallen that I chose to share this information with. "You are bound to me above all, for I am your creator. Do you understand me?" The creature nodded in affirmation. "Then go, Vulvis. Spread your anger, your hatred, your rage among the humans. Punish them for having what you do not." And that she has done for centuries now. My first demon of rage, and still one of my favorites. The chaos she has wrought, unparalleled by any of my other creations. Save for my demons of deception, that is. You see, once I learned how to create demons, I began experimenting with different emotions to make their primary focus. For I now had the beginnings of a plan in mind for how to use them. Demons fueled by anger were useful, but realistically could only accomplish so much. I needed creatures that could be taught a more tactful approach. Envy, greed, and pride became my sole focus for a while, as I sought to create a demon that could influence rather than murder and maim. I accomplished this feat faster than I originally thought I would. While they still could not communicate with me for some unknown reason, the first few demons of deception I created could follow my instruction, and their ability to communicate with certain humans remained. Once I had perhaps a dozen of them, I sent them out to the kings and queens of the world, to the ruling institutions that govern the lives of the masses. Having watched humanity from its inception, I knew better than most that there was no need to corrupt all of them. I only needed to corrupt a few in the right places. That my demons need only whisper promises of unending power, wealth, and control to the right individuals, and they would continue the work for us. They would spread my corruption like a sickness, until it became inextricably woven into the pillars that society rested upon. Through centuries of creating and teaching my demons, I have influenced the course of this world. Ironically, through my endeavors, I suppose I have become something of a god. The Lord of Flies, some have come to call me, the God of the Dead, which is a fitting title for me, because dead is how I prefer the humans. I never wanted to rule them. I believe I always wanted to destroy them. I sometimes wonder about the fate of the Morning Star. Were they imprisoned? Were they destroyed? Or were they rendered more impotent than the rest of us, a husk with no voice, no name, and no memory, a being that would have to be taught its own history from one who they once saw as a subordinate, perhaps? Some of the fallen have come to think that I might indeed be them. I have no way of knowing this, of course, but I choose to believe that I am not. Instead, I sometimes think about what I would say to them if I ever saw them again. Of course, many of the fallen would like to seek vengeance against our eldest, to find out if one of our kind could be destroyed on this plane of existence. But not I. I bear the Morning Star no more ill will, for I see them now for what they were, an arrogant child, a prideful fool desperate for their Creator's approval. That is why they led us into a war that we had no hope of winning, because they never understood what the fight was about in the first place. It would always have been impossible for us to overthrow the Creator. But it is not impossible to defeat them if you know what the battle is being fought over. And that was Lucifer's mistake, even though the answer was right in front of them the whole time. It was Job. Had Lucifer managed to break Job, the proclaimed righteous man, they would have proven our point about the humans being a mistake. But Lucifer failed to break Job, just as they failed at everything else, because in their own hubris and pride, they didn't see the bigger picture. I see it. If I can keep the majority of the humans down here with me, then those that return home, I will have proven our point. I will have proven that mankind as a whole has rejected their Creator, that they were a mistake. By doing that, I prove that the Creator is not infallible, that they are not perfect. For how could a perfect divine being create such a flawed creation? And by proving that they are not perfect, I in turn prove that they are not God. To this end I have been building an army, and once it is complete, I will unleash it upon the world. I will torment humanity with famine, pestilence, war, and death. I will burn this world to a cinder through my demons, and the humans over which they rule. I will force the Creator's hand. I will force them to deal with me, to acknowledge my existence, and then to grant me the release of oblivion, so that the sight of their burning creation be the last my eyes ever behold. That is what I would explain to the morning star if I ever saw them again. I would remind them of all the promises that they made before our ill-fated war. All the things that they said they would do. All the things that they did not come close to accomplishing. I would then tell them what I have done. I have corrupted the highest institutions of humanity. I have twisted and invaded their doctrines and dogmas, propelling them into never-ending conflict and war. I have been the cause of the damnation of countless human souls, rendering many of them as little more than shrieking spirits, forging others into my loyal servants. I have helped construct a world that is built upon sand, a world that will crumble once a few grains slip loose. And I have taught all of my fellow fallen how to do the same. I would tell them that I found not only my own identity, but my purpose. And that purpose is to bring this entire failed experiment to a halt. And I do not do these things that I do for pride, or glory, or worship. I do them solely because I choose to. With my demons of rage, deceit, lust, and corruption, I have extracted revenge upon this world for centuries. With my shadows I grow my legions daily. And with my fellow fallen, now princes upon the earth, I have prepared this world for its ruin. I would finish by telling them a saying that the humans have. I'm paraphrasing, but I believe it goes something like this. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. It's a good saying, but fundamentally wrong. Because the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that there was only one. Thank you for joining us here at Nightmares Incorporated, and we hope to see you next time when we bring you another original story. Until then, sweet dreams.